Isn't it strange that we now have a sequel to this movie? It's been in such a weird development for decades that I feel like most people forgot that there was going to be a sequel around the time of Gladiator. And it's funny to think that all those years later, Ridley Scott was doing his own thing, even though he had teased a sequel and some of the ideas, which, by the way, if you do have a chance, go check them out because they are some bizarre and weird takes they were trying to do with this movie. But a lot of people, when hearing those said ideas, were like, "No thanks, really, Sky, you do you." But now we live in an age where to a movie that you don't think it needs one, come on, you want one. Don't lie. We all know you want one, even though most of us are like, no, not really. But then again, really, Scott is not on a winning streak, so I mean, what else does he have left to him? So time to go back to my closet, see what other movies I can bake out of. Gladiator II is once again directed by Ridley Scott with a screenplay by David Scarpa and a story by Peter Craig and David Scarpa. The film stars Paul Mescal, Pedro Pascal, Denzel Washington, Connie Nielsen, Joseph Quinn, Fred Hechinger, Lior and Derek Jacobi. According to IMDb's plot synopsis, after his home is conquered by the tyrannical emperors who now lead Rome, Lucius is forced to enter the Colosseum and must look to his past to find strength to return the glory of Rome to its people. Like I said, a sequel to Gladiator has been in the works since the film's release, since 2001. This movie has been in the works for 3 decades at this point. Again, it's funny to think that a sequel was planned, but most of us were like thinking to ourselves, man, that was just a good movie. That was just awesome. I don't think that they could ever do more, because I mean, like, what could top this movie? Seriously, what sequel do you think could ever top this film? The ideas that have been floating around for a while, and everyone was just glad that it didn't happen. Like I said, I don't think anybody was like pressuring Ridley Scott to make a sequel as much as Ridley Scott had some bizarre weirdo ideas for decades about how he would want to bring Russell Crowe back through Roman Afterlife and have him be put in like different time periods and all that stuff. Again, go check out the ideas for this movie. It's insane to me on what Ridley Scott was even planning with this said sequel. However, when Ridley Scott hasn't been hitting like he has been before, let's face it, Ridley Scott has been hitting bomb after bomb after bomb and not being well received, although I guess you could say maybe The Last Duel was his better well received movie, but let's be honest, most of his movies that he has directed ever since House of Gucci has not been a winning streak for him with regards to critical reception. So he thought he would go back to hopefully what he once was, this director that everyone looked up to, everyone was inspired by. But nowadays we have directors like Christopher Nolan or Denis Villeneuve. They kind of fill his void. And so I kind of feel like there's a bit of like this feeling of he's being usurped by other directors who now do kind of what he does, especially Denis Villeneuve. I think he does things on a much more technological and more upscale level. And I just kind of feel like Ridley Scott's just kind of there nowadays because it just seems like he's just no longer as popular as he once was. But he is determined to keep himself busy. And after seeing this sequel, because I watched the first, of course, you all know, I really love that first movie. It's really excellent. It is a fantastic film all around. I was surprised on how well this sequel was. I legit was. As much as I was excited, I was like, all right, this could still fall into the camp of this really didn't need a sequel, this really didn't feel like we needed one, and I was generally enjoyed by what I was watching. Now, is it still a perfect movie? No. There's still some problems that I saw with the movie, but I enjoyed it overall, so here are the positives that I have. The performances are stellar. Both Mescal, Pascal, and Washington are electrifying throughout. They all bring their A game throughout this entire movie. Clearly, these 3 guys truly want to respect Ridley Scott and his work and what Gladiator means to them, or at the very least carry on the legacy of that movie. And so all three of them I think are excellent. I understand a lot of people can say that Pascal is overexposed these days. I can kind of understand that, but I mean, if he could still deliver good performances, that's all that matters to me. And Washington, while I will say it is strange for him to be in this movie, and although it is a little bit like Alonzo Harris from Training Day, I mean, at the end of the day, he's still entertaining enough. And Paul Mescal, a new up-and-coming actor, taking on this role, which he is taking over from Spencer Treat Clark, who in the first movie played Lucius in that first film, and so he is playing a now much older and more defined Lucius, and to see him step in kind of the shoes of the similar veins of Russell Crowe, of Maximus Decimus Meridius, I think it does show him as being a capable lead of taking charge of a movie and being a character that you would like to follow in some way. Connie Nielsen continues to be good as Lucilia. She retains what she had from the first movie, which is good because if she had tried to do something a little bit different than what she did from the first film, I think that would have been a little bit jarring. But thankfully, she still retains the same kind of wise maturity that she has grown since then. But I do think that at the end of the day, she still delivers a good performance all around. Both Joseph Quinn and Fred Hechinger, despite their characters, and I have a problem with their characters, they do well together. I think they pull off really capable performances. I've seen Joseph Quinn as of recently, and he's blown up as of recently, which is good. And I think they're fine. I think they are serviceable in this movie, and I think they deliver a performance that is of an outrageous level, but at the end of the day, they did their jobs well. The direction is on point. Once again, director Ridley Scott still knows how to bring Rome to life, making this feel epic, just like how that first film was. It's crazy to me on how Ridley Scott, at his age, still bring the world of Rome to life after all these years. It's insane. It's crazy to me. We have had so many movies that try to be like the sword and sandal film, if you will, like the genre, and try to recapture what Gladiator did. But this movie, I think, does it the most with regards to still capturing that feeling and style that Ridley Scott had brought to that first movie so well that it surprises me after decades he can still manage to make you feel immersive with the world that he tries to bring to the audience. The action is entertaining. Every Gladiator sequence feels intense and entertaining when it happens, capturing the feeling of the first, but I will say it is a little over the top. I'm not going to deny the sequences that involve a ship in the Colosseum with sharks, or a Colosseum fight with monkeys, or rather baboons. Oh, and also a rhino. I'm not going to deny it is a little insane and crazier than the first, but I can't deny I was still having a fun time watching it and seeing all this crazy shenanigans going on, but it was still kind of cool to still see even some of the smaller practical fights when they do happen, and I think they work really well. And if there's one thing I can give Ridley Scott credit with regards to how he directs those sequences, he knows how to keep the audience entertained and at least excited with what happens in those sequences. Cinematography is stunning. Again, cinematographer John Matheson recaptures the look and scale of what Rome once more. It still feels like what the first movie had brought, which is this grand scale, gorgeous looking movie that really emphasizes the power of Rome, how powerful these people are. And I think he does a magnificent job of capturing that as well as the gladiator sequences. The music is excellent. Composer Harry Gregson Williams, who replaces Zimmer and Guerrera, does well with continuing the feeling and tone of what the first movie had brought. It doesn't feel like an imitation, but more of a continuation, but in a more respectful way. It doesn't feel like he's trying to outdo what Zimmer and Guerrera have brought to that first movie. Thankfully, he's just there to just be like, hey, I'm continuing with what was left behind with that first movie. And I think he does a fairly decent job of capturing the feeling of Gladiator overall. The production is incredible. Just like the first, the amount of detail is amazing. From the costumes, props, and sets, it's all fantastic. If there is one thing I could say both of these movies are consistent with, is the production team and the costume design and the props and the sets. It is all fantastic to see how much detail the production team puts into this movie with regards to making this feel epic in so many ways. The writing is effective. Writer David Scarpa retains the same tone and style of the first It may, I will say, repeat some beats as its predecessor, but it works still. It's nothing to write home about. I still wasn't really enjoying the conversations that characters were having, especially when Denzel would talk with Mescal about having, his rage is his gift, or the power of Rome, and the powers of like civilization, how they underestimate people. Those were conversations I did find myself enjoying, and they were well written enough. I've been having a good time. I'm not gonna lie, I was very much enjoying what I was watching. Although I will say I started to now see some issues being popped up here and there, so here are the negatives. The pacing and runtime feels extended. While I can excuse the first film, like I said in my review, I can excuse the length of that first movie because of how much I was so engaged with the movie that I was willing to accept that, but here I can't with this one. With a runtime of 2 hours and 28 minutes, I think it could have been shaven down to 2 hours in 10 or 15 minutes, if you will. I don't think this needed to be close to how the original's runtime was. And I just feel like there are certain moments in this movie where the pacing does dip and it does start to kind of slow and crawl. And scenes do kind of drag on much longer than they need to. The visuals are distracting. Anytime visuals are used for action, they become very obvious. It starts to kind of be cartoonish in a way. It doesn't feel convincing enough. And it does kind of start to feel like now everything's just getting ridiculous. And as much as I am enjoying the action sequences, I do think that having the visual effects here does kind of break the immersion of what Gladiator is supposed to be. And so by making it more big and grand in terms of the Coliseum fights, I mean, I don't think they needed to go overboard in some parts as much as I was enjoying them. The villains are outrageous. Aside from Quinn, Heschinger's performances, their characters are a split version of Commodus. Alright, I'm not gonna lie, they're kind of like a split version of what Joaquin Phoenix had brought to that first movie, but more over the top. And that's the thing I want to emphasize is that they're much more outrageous and crazier than Commodus, but I think that's kind of what hurts the movie because everyone else is trying to take this as seriously as they can be, and while I understand it is for dramatics and trying to be almost like a play, if you will, it does get to a point where you look at those two and then you look at everyone else who are trying to take this as seriously as they can, but where Joaquin Phoenix knew how to walk that balance. I feel like having both Joseph Quinn, Fred Hechinger, who aren't bad, I just feel like they do kind of cause the tone of the movie to be a little bit off with them, and compared to everyone else, these characters are just more exaggerated. I'm not blaming these actors, I'm not, because they're doing what they're told and they do a good job. But I'm just saying, for the characters, I do think that they go a little bit overboard with what these characters are supposed to mean. Though the sequel wasn't necessary to have, it was a good one. I'm not going to sit here and deny that I wasn't having a good time while watching it. It was nice to see this in a theater on a big screen, watching it all for the first time. It was an entertaining one at best. Although you could watch the first and that be it. You wouldn't have to watch this and continue on. But if you saw this, you probably won't be disappointed. I guess you would just be like, well, now this is a more exaggerated version of the first, which it kind of is. It's a more upscaled and much more over the top version, but I still don't think that this was a bad movie overall. So I'm going to give Gladiator 2 a 7 out of 10. I think it's good. I think it's enjoyable for what it's worth. I don't think this is necessarily one that will ruin the impact of the first movie. Does it mean that is it necessary to watch? I don't think so, but again, it's up to you. You can take it or leave it. I'm just saying for myself, I don't mind it. I had a good time overall. Now I will be doing my review for Wicked and then soon the Moana movies, and then November could be done. So yes, look forward to those reviews and other movie TV show reviews coming soon.